Colleagues. Order. We start with question of Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Dr. Warren Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question 1.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself as well with your tribute to Karen? I'd also like to start by wishing you, your team and the whole House a happy new year. The Secretary of State and I regularly meet with executive ministers. I recently met with the Education Minister, Paul Given, to discuss integration in our schools. We have provided a record settlement of £19.3 billion for Northern Ireland to improve public services, and I look forward to working with all ministers in Northern Ireland as they deliver on their priorities in 2026.
Dr. Warren Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Happy New Year to you too. This government has delivered a largest funding settlement to Northern Ireland since devolution. In addition to this record support to Northern Ireland and across the United Kingdom, what discussions is he having on sharing best practice with Northern Ireland, but also that sharing across the wider United Kingdom?
My honourable friend is right to mention that record settlement, but it's not just a question of cutting a cheque and walking away. It's about working and sharing best practice. As she mentioned, I've had conversations with the Health Minister about how we can share best practice as part of our 10-year NHS plan, and I'm confident we can continue to work together to deliver better outcomes.
Sir Julian Smith.
Can I press the Minister on discussions that he's having with the Executive with regard to digital services? Dublin has just produced a very innovative digital services plan for public services. Can I urge the Government to talk closely with the Executive to make sure that Northern Ireland is keeping pace with Dublin in this area?
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. I'm very happy to ensure that features in our conversations with executive ministers. I think Northern Ireland is a place that is leading the way in so many of these areas, so I'd be continuing to have those conversations.
Minister Mywood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Happy New Year to you. Policing numbers in Northern Ireland are at their lowest ever level, and both the Police Service of Northern Ireland and Policy Exchange have warned that reopening cases from the Troubles will place a huge additional financial burden on the police. This risks both policing numbers and national security. So is the Minister happy with that situation and let it happen, or will the Secretary of State be compensating it, PSNI, for the decisions made by his department?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A number of the cases actually being taken away from the police service if their families refer those cases to the Commission. And as I mentioned in a previous answer, with a record settlement for Northern Ireland, it's for the Executive to determine how that money is spent, including how they're funding their police force.
Gavin Robbins.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister will be aware that the Finance Minister yesterday, in an ill-considered way, published his budget, not an agreed budget, for consultation. And he will know the pressures associated with that decision, and he will know the challenges that that brings for politics in Northern Ireland. But one thing that has been absent from the lexicon of politics in Northern Ireland over the last number of years is the fiscal framework. Can he update us as to where his government is on negotiations with Treasury and the Northern Ireland Executive?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased as part of that consultation there's a record settlement of £19.3 billion to fund those services. In relation to the negotiations that the Right Honourable Gentleman mentions, those negotiations are continuing.
Gavin Robinson.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister will also know of the pressures that affect our health service in Northern Ireland, but alarmingly we understand that the European Union are going to ban the sale of antimicrobial resistance drugs without prescription. Though it shouldn't apply in Northern Ireland, it will, and there are some 60,000 products that are sold over the counter. Our health service could not facilitate 60,000 additional GP appointments. This is an alarming development, and I'd like to hear the Minister indicate not only that he understands the severity of it, the impact of it, but has going to take steps to address it.
I am aware of the reforms the Right Honourable Gentleman mentions, and I should say the Government shares the EU's ambition to take action against antimicrobial resistance, but I'm also aware of the potential impact on Northern Ireland's health service, particularly demand for GP appointments, as he mentions. We have raised this, and I will be happy to write to the Right Honourable Gentleman with an update in due course.
Yes.
Question number 2, please, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I will answer questions 2 and 9 together. I regularly meet with a variety of stakeholders to talk about the Northern Ireland Troubles Bill, including veterans groups, political parties in Northern Ireland and victims and families who are still living with the effects of those decades of terrible violence.
Akehurst.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Veterans in North Durham who have contacted me, whatever unit they personally served in, are particularly concerned about the impact of the new legislation on those who served in the Special Forces. Can the Secretary of State reassure me that he has met with the SAS Regimental Association and is responding to the specific concerns expressed by them?
I'm very happy to give my honourable friend that assurance. I did indeed meet with the SAS Association recently as part of the discussions I and my colleagues in the Ministry of Defence are having with veterans. We are listening to the concerns that have been expressed, and as I've said to the House on a number of occasions previously, we want to make sure the legislation responds to those.
Paul Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Under the previous government's Unlawful Legacy Act, the PSNI were required to shut down more than 1,000 investigations, including 225 investigations into the deaths of soldiers and veterans. Can the Secretary of State please assure the families of those murdered British Armed Forces personnel that should they wish to approach the Reform Commission, it will be able to consider their case and may be able to provide them with the answers that many have long sought?
Well, my honourable friend is quite right to draw attention to one of the implications of the Legacy Act 2023 in shutting down all of those investigations. He is indeed right that families are perfectly free to refer cases to the Commission, and I know that the Commission is keen to investigate as many cases as come their way in order to try and provide those families who've waited so long for some answers.
Gregory Campbell.
Speaker, engaging with and listening to stakeholders is good, but there needs to be a positive outcome to both. There also needs to be specific and clear references in the bill to no paramilitaries being permitted to serve on the Victims and Survivors Advisory Group. Will that be the case?
I have already given the House that assurance from this dispatch box. And when we come to the committee stage of the bill, we will have an opportunity to debate the bill in its current form, and the many amendments I can see have already been submitted.
Sir David Davis.
The Secretary of State has stated many times that the previous government's legislation in this area had support from no political parties in Northern Ireland. Can you tell the House which political parties support his legislation?
All of the political parties in Northern Ireland that expressed their profound opposition to immunity have welcomed the fact that immunity will go under the legislation that we have brought before the House. That includes the Right Honourable Gentleman sitting next to the Right Honourable Gentleman who supports its removal. Well, indeed, the leader of the DUP. And that is a sign that the government has been listening to views in Northern Ireland, which unfortunately the Legacy Act failed to do.
Alex Burkhardt, Shadow Secretary of State.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and a Happy New Year to you. Over Christmas, in the Telegraph, 7 former senior SAS officers wrote, "In this Troubles Bill, the government is complicit in the war on our armed forces." A few days later, the Northern Ireland Veterans Commissioner, appointed by this government, said that the bill treats veterans worse than terrorists and is, and I quote, eating at the very fabric of our armed forces. Can the Secretary of State tell the House which former senior officers support this bill?
Well, I would say to the honourable gentleman, I don't agree with either of those characterisations which he has just referred to, and I am confident that the protections which we have designed specifically for veterans will change the experience that they have in relation to the legacy process. But as I've also said to the House, we are continuing to talk to veterans and veterans organisations, and I want to produce a bill that is able to offer the reassurance that they are looking for, that we have a system that is fair and proportionate and recognises the service they have given to the country.
Alex Burkhardt.
Well, I note that the Secretary of State was not able to give a single example There is, I'm afraid, an ostrich-like complacency to the government's approach to this legislation. Senior representatives of our armed forces are telling this House that the legislation is impacting morale and effectiveness. In November, 9 former 4-star generals, 9, Mr. Speaker, argued that this morally incoherent bill poses a direct threat to national security. Now, these generals tell us that highly trained members of special forces are already leaving the service. By definition, these men are very, very difficult to replace. No wonder that the Times newspaper has said that a fundamental lack of political and military understanding lies at the heart of this bill. Why does the government think it knows better than our armed forces?
Well, the government had to do something about the last government's failed Legacy Act, which had no support in Northern Ireland. And if one is seeking to help the people of Northern Ireland to deal with the continuing consequences of the Troubles, the legislation has to have that support, and the last government failed to do that. On the impact on recruitment, as he will have heard when the Minister for the Armed Forces answered the urgent question on Monday, inflows continue to improve, and inflow is up 13% this year compared to September 2024.
Paul Curler, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Happy New Year. The Secretary of State was sitting alongside the Veterans Minister on Monday when I asked the Minister whether he was listening to his veterans' concerns regarding the Troubles Bill. The Minister convinced me that he is, and we've just heard the Secretary of State do likewise. But is anyone acting upon those concerns? Before Christmas, at the dispatch box, the Secretary of State promised to write to me detailing with which veterans groups he'd met, but I've heard nothing since. I also wrote to the Under-Secretary asking to meet to discuss the veterans' ongoing concerns, but I've heard nothing since. So will the Secretary of State please detail all the veterans groups he's met with and meet with me to discuss their continuing concerns?
Well, can I apologise to the honourable member for him not having received the letter to which he's just referred, and I can assure him I will remedy that very, very promptly indeed. I and the Defence Ministers have met a very large number of organisations. I would just point out that the 6 protections that the government has put forward, none of them were contained in the last government's Legacy Act. Not a single one of them. And we intend to continue to listen and to respond to the concerns that have been raised.
Ruth Jones.
Question number 3, please, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I will answer questions 3, 5, 7 and 11 together. The European Convention on Human Rights underpins not only the Good Friday Agreement, but also key international agreements on trade, security and migration. The government is committed to the ECHR. We also remain determined to uphold the Good Friday Agreement and human rights in Northern Ireland.
Jones.
Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for that response. The Good Friday Agreement was indeed a proud legacy of the last Labour government. So does the Secretary of State agree that the reckless approach adopted by the parties opposite towards the ECHR risks undermining the huge progress made since 1998?
Well, I do agree with my honourable friend, and it is clear that those advocating leaving the ECHR have not given any serious consideration to the implications for the Good Friday Agreement. Indeed, when pressed on this in the summer, the honourable member for Clacton noted that it could, and I quote, take years and years to solve, so that will not be at the forefront of what we do. Mr. Speaker, I would simply say that is not good enough, and those who are advocating leaving the ECHR need to reflect on what they're arguing for.
Peter Lamb.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the chaos around the world is being experienced by politicians playing fast and loose with international law, it is deeply concerning how Conservatives and Reform MPs are speaking so flippantly of the risks of violating the Good Friday Agreement by leaving the European Convention on Human Rights. Could the Minister give his assessment of the risk of this?
Well, as I've told the House before, I think it would be extremely irresponsible. The Good Friday Agreement was very carefully negotiated, as the House needs no reminding, between several parties, and it would be reckless for one party to march in and seek to remove one of its founding pillars.
Jacob Collier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The European Convention on Human Rights is foundational to the Good Friday Agreement, and given that Reform and the Conservatives want to crash us out of that convention, does the Secretary of State agree that this is risking the Good Friday Agreement and that they really ought to think again?
I do agree with my honourable friend, and we need to remember that it is the Human Rights Act which gives all of us access to the rights and protections contained in the European Convention on Human Rights. And to leave it would put us alone in Europe in the company of Russia and Belarus. Is that really where the opposition want to be? Welcomed with a pat on the back by President Putin.
Chair of the Select Committee, Tony Antoniazzi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, my predecessor, Northern Ireland Affairs Select Committee, took evidence that leaving the ECHR would have implications for policing in Northern Ireland. Does he agree that calls to leave the ECHR would add to the challenges faced by the PSNI, and what assessment has he made of this potential impact?
Well, I do agree that it could have very wide-ranging implications for Northern Ireland in particular, as well as for the rest of the country. I have not made such an assessment because it's not a policy which the government is advocating. It's for those who are proposing to leave the ECHR to answer the very fair question she's just raised.
Jim Allister with...
It is plain wrong to say that survival of the Belfast Agreement is dependent on the ECHR. But why is the Secretary of State so selective in his Belfast Agreement allegiance? Because it was he who implemented the jettisoning of the agreement's cornerstone of cross-community consent when he invited the Northern Ireland Assembly to continue the imposition of the Windsor Framework without cross-community consent. To the Secretary of State, is it only nationalist consent that matters to him under the Belfast Agreement?
Well, I would say to him that the steps that I took in relation to the vote on the renewal of the Windsor Framework arrangements were absolutely in line with the provisions that have been put in place by this House. And as a result, Lord Murphy produced his report, and the honourable gentleman will have seen the practical steps that the government is taking in response to the very sensible recommendations that he made.
Mr. Speaker, how will the Secretary of State be responding to troubled stakeholders groups that say that their members' rights under Articles 6 and 8 of the ECHR are being impugned by his maladroit Troubles Bill?
Well, it is for all those who wish to argue about the rights that they feel that the ECHR and the Human Rights Act gives them. I would simply say to the honourable gentleman that in bringing the bill forward, I have certified as the Minister responsible that the bill complies with the European Convention.
Alex Easton.
Speaker, Secretary of State, is it not the case, as a matter of international law, that the United Kingdom could withdraw from the ECHR while at the same time ensuring that equivalent rights and protections are preserved in our domestic law?
The honourable gentleman is, of course, correct to say that it is possible for signatories to the Convention to withdraw. It's a very bad idea, and the government doesn't support it.
John Cooper.
Speaker, does the Secretary of State not agree with expert opinion that says that while we remain signatories to the ECHR, we will not be able to protect our veterans from vexatious litigation?
I say to the honourable gentleman, as I've said many times in the past, there is no such thing as vexatious prosecutions, and the ECHR protects the rights of all of our citizens, including the veterans who served with such distinction in Operation Banner.
Durham.
Continuing cost of living crisis. Sorry, number 6. You're correct me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Northern Ireland's economy is one of the strongest of any part of the United Kingdom. It has the lowest unemployment, and economic growth outpaced the UK in the year ending Q2 2025. This performance is being supported by this government's policies, including significant investment in economic development and a record settlement for the executive.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A continuing cost of living crisis and a recent budget that failed to support workers, families and businesses in a meaningful way. Now, it's not often that I agree with the First Minister, but with absolutely no action to address lagging productivity. She's right, isn't she?
Well, the Northern Ireland Executive has very considerable responsibilities in respect of the Northern Ireland economy. I note the fact that the Finance Minister has published a draft three-year budget. It is the fact that we had a three-year spending review that has now given the Northern Ireland Executive the opportunity to do the same for the first time in a number of years. As the Minister said, there are choices that the Executive has got to make. It's true of all governments around the world, and I look forward to seeing them coming forward with a proposal for a balanced budget.
Hannah.
Thank you. The Minister will be aware that for a number of months I've been raising question 6.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since becoming a minister in the Northern Ireland office, I have met with executive ministers, building on the instinctive engagement of my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State. Our discussions have been wide-ranging, including around economic growth and transforming public services.
The Minister will be aware that for a number of months I've been raising concerns about the Local Growth Fund and its impact in Northern Ireland. Just before Christmas, organisations got the devastating news of a large cut to the Local Growth Fund, which will devastate a number of support jobs and work helping vulnerable people into meaningful employment. Will the Minister outline what steps the NIO will take to prevent the loss of those crucial support jobs and help put in place those services to tackle our low productivity?
Can I just pay tribute to the great work done by the voluntary sector in Northern Ireland? I do know this has been a difficult time, which is why our engagement has been so important with the sector. That engagement, I can assure my honourable friend, will continue to be important, especially as we launch the Local Growth Fund, £45.5 million a year, Mr. Speaker, to support growth in Northern Ireland.
Eastwood.
As we've just heard, Minister, Northern Ireland is operating in a considerable budgetary constraint. The Local Growth Fund, as highlighted, is going to cause huge damage. What can you do to assure my constituents in Lagan Valley and across Northern Ireland that you will listen to our concerns and act on them?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have put a record settlement into Northern Ireland, £19.3 billion. Obviously, that can be used to support people. The Local Growth Fund's been built for a year, has been set aside to make sure that we can support those groups, and I'll continue to engage with them during that period.
Gavin votes.
Question number 10, Mr. Speaker.
This budget provided Northern Ireland with an additional £370 million on top of the record settlement of £19.3 billion each year on average over the spending review period. The decisions we have taken will ease trade within the UK and ensure families across Northern Ireland benefit from help with the cost of living through policies like cutting energy bills and lifting the two-child benefit cap.
Thank you. And as the Secretary of State said, £370 million for the Northern Ireland Executive at this year's budget and £505 million for Wales on top of the settlements announced at the spending review shows that this government takes supporting the devolved nation seriously. So does the Secretary of State agree with me that cooperation between the UK government and the Northern Ireland Executive, like the other devolved nations, is crucial to pulling children out of poverty, improving public services and kick-starting growth across the UK?
I do agree with my honourable friend, and that is why the government's decision to lift the two-child benefit cap was widely welcomed in Northern Ireland. I would also point out that Northern Ireland is being funded slightly above its level of need. It gets 24% more than equivalent spending in England, and that means that the Executive has more money to make its decisions with.
Mr. Speaker, when the Executive was restored 2 years ago, there was a transformation fund put in place to allow the transformation of public services. As of yet, that money hasn't been fully allocated. Will the Secretary of State use his offices to encourage the Executive to actually implement that transformation fund to transform Northern Ireland public services?
Well, the Public Services Transformation Fund is a very important demonstration of the partnership between the UK Government and the Northern Ireland Executive. As the Honourable Member will be well aware, the first 6 projects were funded and they're making good progress. The Transformation Board is currently considering bids that are coming in for the next phase of funding. We are, of course, as is the Executive, keen to see that money spent to support the process of transformation, which is hugely needed in the way in which public services are delivered in Northern Ireland.
Sarah Purchin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 12.
Secretary of State.
The whole House will agree that we owe our Operation Banner veterans an enormous debt of gratitude. That is why the Government is introducing 6 protections for veterans involved in legal processes relating to their service. We are confident that this will change their experience, ensuring that the process is fair and balanced.
Sarah Purchin.
Thank you for the answer. Does the Secretary of State agree with the Northern Ireland's Veteran Commissioner that this Troubles Bill treats our brave veterans more harshly than terrorists?
I do not agree with that assessment. I've had many discussions with the Northern Ireland Veterans Commissioner, and I think if one looks at the facts, including the prosecutions that have taken place, there have been prosecutions of paramilitary terrorists than there have been of any soldiers at all. Indeed, one conviction of a soldier for a Troubles-related offence in the last 27.5 years.